In this video, my good friend Erin and I have traveled all the way from Texas to Chicago to help Alma here rebuild her back set of stairs. Let me show you how we did it. By the way, this video is going to be a little bit different than normal. A videographer friend of mine jumped in to film it for me so that I could just concentrate on building the set of stairs. I hope that you enjoy it. Both Alma and Erin are builders makers, and while Alma could have tackled the stairs on her own, I offered to come help as I've built two sets and could speed up the process. Truthfully, it was a great excuse for the three of us friends to hang out while also being productive. The staircase, though, was pretty worn out. There was plenty of rotten wood, especially in the post, as they were in direct contact with the ground. The rise and run of the steps were all slightly different, and the most problematic issue was there was no landing to the stairs. Okay, so now that you see the befores, let's get into the rebuilding process. The first step was to demo the existing staircase. In this particular instance, though, it wasn't as easy as taking a sledge to it because there are two posts holding up an awning of the house. And before these can be removed, this awning needs to be supported in a different way so that it doesn't just sag down. I didn't want to just prop it up with two vertical posts and those be in the way of the already tight working quarters of the new stairs that we would be building. So I decided to try more of a support beam header type of holding, where it would span horizontally across the entire awning, then vertical props would be used on either side, therefore pushing them a ways out from the building area. The thing to work around here is to not interfere with the siding, which comes down about an inch on either side of that awning. To avoid knocking into this with our header, we first placed a 2x on top of the 4x4 we would be running across the awning. This also gives us a way to secure it to the roof, which would temporarily hold it up just in case one of the vertical props gets knocked out while we're building and moving around it. Okay, perfect. Now the awning is supported, but the temporary props are also as out of the way as possible. Let's move on to demo. I was expecting these posts to go up into the rafters of the awning, but instead they were just secured with nails and butted up to the bottom side. We used a sawzall to cut off the majority of the post, then hammered out the small remaining chunk. For the rest of the stairs, we used a combination of tools to break it apart, using a hammer or sledge when we didn't need to be so delicate, and a demo blade and a sawzall when we did, such as when we needed to remove the stringers from the house. And now on to the next problem to sort out. Getting rid of this giant, meaning heavy, concrete step. This was difficult, and we tried an assortment of things. I first hoped that it would break up easily, but after working hard to bust up just a corner or two, we saw that it actually had rebar in it. So our next hope was to try and move it. A long rock bar would have made this job a lot easier, but Alma didn't have one, so we made do with the tools that she did have, which was a shovel, a pry bar, leverage, and a strap. The goal was to get a strap around it and then try pulling it.
That cracks me up.
We didn't get very far with it, so next we threw a dolly and a few furniture dollies into the mix. After getting it up on two furniture dollies, we were able to heave this close to 500-pound block out of the way. Granted, not very far, but it was enough to get on with the rest of the build. Okay, so the first step in the rebuilding process was to build out a landing. This will give them a proper standing area instead of just having a few inches before heading into the doorway. Be sure to check with your local building codes here, as many stipulate a minimum on what this landing needs to be. We first cut a header and attached the two outside framing members to it before moving it into place right under the doorway. Now this needs to be placed so that when the decking material is attached on top, it will be flush with the existing threshold. After making sure it was level, we attached it to the house, then started figuring out the location to set the supporting post. We'll be using a post-based bracket to anchor the post to the ground and also elevate it up off of the ground. We plumbed and then temporarily attached a 4x4 to the header using some Bessie clip clamps so that we could mark the location of the bracket below it. Once its location was determined, a hammer drill was used to drill a hole in the slab to place a concrete anchor. This goes into the center of the bracket to attach the bracket to the ground. Then the post can be set on top of it and attached to the bracket. This is much easier to do with 2 people so that one can be reading the level to plumb up the post while the other one is driving in the screws. Also, even though these are on brackets, I would still recommend using treated lumber here. Now a front framing member made from 2x material can be added to the front to complete the landing framing. Now we could cut the post to the actual height needed, which is just flush to the top side of the 2x material.
I can't fit.
I used a circular saw to cut through as much of the material on these as possible, then Aaron finished them off with a sawzall. Oh, and I almost forgot the center joist. It's no problem though. We quickly threw in the actual last framing member of the landing, which will help support the deck boards that go in next. Alright, and that is the landing complete. So moving on to the part I was sweating, which is laying out the stair stringers. This part can be nerve-wracking, but it is a simple formula. And actually, I'll link to a video down below that I think explains it very well. Things to keep in mind. Again, check out your local code because there are minimums and maximums for the rise and run. I made these with a 7 3/4 inch rise and an 11 inch run. The goal is to have all of the steps the same. It's really funny how easily a body can tell when a step is off from the others. But it also creates a hazard if they are off, so it's more than just an aesthetics thing. You can see that it's being cut from treated 2x12. Some people will overcut their line here in order to make the cutting go quicker, but the better way is to cut up to your line on both directions, then come back with a jigsaw or a sawzall to complete the cut and drop the part. After getting one stringer cut, we test fitted it in place just to make sure that it was correct before making more. If it's right, then you can use the first one as a template for the others that are needed. This is a 36-inch wide staircase, so we put in 3 stringers.
Colby! Oh man, come on, Colby.
You're talking about Kobe?
What's his name?
Kobe?
Oh, it's close.
While I cut stair stringers, Aaron started cutting treads and risers that we'll need later on, then Alma started painting as we fed her parts. If you have the time, I definitely recommend painting things before you assemble them. It's not only easier to paint boards that are loose, but it also gives them better protection as all sides can get coated. Now, we were already working in kind of a tight spot because there is a cellar door just to the left of the stairs. So even though the next step was to start attaching the stringers to the landing, we paused to drill the concrete anchor needed to set the post base. This way we do it while we still had plenty of working room to get a body and tool in there. Once that was in, we started attaching the stringers. As you can see, this is not flush to the end of the landing, but is inset some. And this is because I really wanted the 4x4 post to go all the way to the ground instead of resting on top of the stair.
Yeah, you did it! Like butter. Just flip that around. Cool.
Since you can't cut through a stringer, we moved it in just enough so that it would butt up to the inside of the post. We did the same thing for the placement of the far right stringer. And you can see that we're using the stair stringer hanging brackets. And I have linked to all the brackets down below if you have questions on what we used. To anchor the stringers down to the concrete, we inserted in a 2x4 and a cutout at the very base. This is something that you can mark and cut for when you're making the stringers. And now we can pre-drill using a concrete bit and then drive in some masonry screws. From here it goes pretty quickly. Next we needed to throw in some posts, so after giving them a quick coat of paint, we cut them to size and position them on their brackets, which we already attached to the ground. Of course, being careful to avoid hitting the header, each other, or the house in the process. Once the posts were upright, we would throw a level on them to get them plumb, and then attach them with screws at the base first. Then, still reading the level on at least 2 of the faces, Aaron attached it to the underside of the awning. We used 2 screws per side here, making sure to hit the rafters that were in range. Now that the 2 main posts were in, that header and its 2 props can be removed. We hopped up on ladders to first take out all of the screws holding the header up to the awning. Then, when Aaron and I were ready to support the beam, Alma kicked out and removed the vertical props. Oh, and in case you're worried, that is a phone line in the air, not power. Before closing in the stairs, we took the opportunity to drive in a few screws on the inside of the stringers to tie them into the 2 posts. Then we started attaching risers, which are the vertical boards of the steps. And this is where things really start to fly. We already had these boards cut and painted, so we could just very quickly throw them in place and secure them with screws. After the risers comes the treads, which are the horizontal boards on stairs. These are attached the same way, by a few screws into each stringer. For these, you can use 2 boards to make up the distance as we have here, or you can use a single wide board. Then, just a tip for you, you can lay down some construction adhesive under the treads to prevent squeaking in the steps. Then a tip to work quicker is to cut a spacer from a scrap to the length of your needed overhang on the side. This way you can use the spacer to line up the next board instead of pulling a tape on each and every one. It is a pretty exciting stage when you can go up and down the steps for the first time. It's Alma's house, so she did the honors of trying them out first.
Solid. Ooh, very solid. Come on, Aaron.
Move out of the way. Let me get my boot prints on there. Oh yeah, that's nice. Oh yeah.
So originally, the tall posts were on the second to last step, which is where the handrail ends. However, now that the steps were all of the same rise and run, and we added in that spacious landing, there were 3.5 steps past the post, which meant that there wouldn't be a handrail for that portion. None of us were a fan of that, so we decided to add in a few more posts closer to the bottom of the steps. While Alma went to grab more post brackets for them, Aaron and I started on making and attaching the handrail for the upper section. These are made from simple 2x4s that are angled and attached to the house, as well as the 4x4 posts.
No, it's amazing, but it's not that good. It's a little bitter.
You want to try?
Because I haven't done this in so long. Hold on, hold on. Woo! That was 2 turns if you didn't count.
We started attaching the vertical slats, once again using a spacer to make quick work of this step. Then we would drive in 1 screw at the top, plumb it up with a level, and then drive in the bottom screw. After getting the top portion done, we moved to the bottom to repeat. Since we didn't accommodate for post here, we used a jigsaw to easily cut into a tread so a post could slip in and butt up to the stringer. It was a little cramped getting on the inside of the stringer to attach the post, but I was able to wiggle in there.
Alma said come stay at my pad. I didn't realize she meant concrete pad.
Oh, and just a tip, picking up a post level that reads plumb on 2 faces at once is a really good investment in my opinion. Again, we left the posts long here so that they could be cut to the exact height after the handrail was placed. As we did on that top section, we quickly cut and threw in the handrails, the vertical slats, and then cut each post to height using 2 cuts with a circular saw. The last thing to add before calling it complete is a top cap on all 4 sections of the handrail, which we toenailed in from the underside to hide the screws from view. Okay, and there we go, a drastically more stable and functional set of stairs. If you have a set of stairs on your to-do list, then I hope that you found this video helpful. Of course, each setup will be different, but the basics are the same. It is an intimidating project, but all the obstacles that come along with building a new set or rebuilding an old set can be worked through, so take your time and have some fun with it.
So, in my opinion, that is not bad for 3 days worth of work. 3 strong women. Everything is linked for you down below. All the tools that we use, these guys' social media, Erin's YouTube. She makes some wonderful videos. And I guess that's it. So, I hope that you learned something, and I'll see you on my next video.
Oh!
Yeah. Cheesy 5.